Okay, on today's video I'm going to talk about what is called modified broad match, a keyword match type, and its removal through the Google Ads system, what that means for your business potentially. And your campaigns, of course, that you set up through Google Ads. Bing Ads also uses keyword match types, but doesn't use the modified broad match keyword match type, so that no changes there. And basically, I'm going to explain how I have adjusted our strategies here, given that we work with hundreds of different campaigns to work around it. And what that should mean with your results. Modified broad match is a keyword match type, which if you don't know what keyword match types are, it's basically you're specifying to Google as to when you tell Google you want to bid on a keyword, which should trigger your ad, is it going to be exactly what you type in, or a little bit like, or a lot alike, or so on and so forth. One of the things that has changed over the years, and there's stats out about this that you can find, that over the years people have typed in longer and longer phrases all the time into Google as to specify what they want. Now they're to the point, and have been for a couple of years now really, they'll type out a whole sentence almost and a question mark, and use it almost like, if you ever remember the search engine Ask Jeeves, the way that was supposed to be designed in the first place. Well, that's kind of Google now. And anyway, with that, us as advertisers, we've had to work harder to set up our advertising, at least if you want really good results, or expect better than average results like we do, which is not cliche. I'll explain how and why our ads were different and how than other people's. But with that, there's more ways that people were then searching for what you sell than there are ways that you can actually physically list. And so with that, you either had to put in a few keywords and let Google find everything else for you. Otherwise, if you wanted to have specific ad copy show up for specific keywords, then you still had to rely on the match types. And so you could do the exact match, which is the one with the brackets that get you pretty much close to what you want. There's phrase match, which you had basically Google would put words before or after your term. Then modified broad match was with the plus symbols, and you could add words before, after, or in the middle of words, and then the words themselves could be reverse or forward. And regular broad match itself, which was something I never used, was something like, instead of, if you had a keyword red shoes, it might trigger ads for red stilettos, even though it's a type of red shoe. It's probably not what the user wants. If you offered some other kind of red shoes, you're letting the engine kind of decide what, give you some different types of customers that may work or whatever, and then use the history of what people typed in that converted to guide your future ads. Something like that might be where somebody used broad match, keyword match types. But anyway, I'm going to explain. So I used modified broad match and never used broad match, specifically because broad match was too wild. Modified broad match, because people type in so many different searches that especially for not so much local campaigns, but national campaigns, generally speaking, where we had to use the modified broad match because people were typing sentences. And whereas we could have hundreds of unique ad copy, which we actually did do, and this is something that we do to bust out results in every market that we're in, and pick a few hundred keywords. That few hundred keywords might be the top 300 or 400 people use, but there's still another 2,000 that people use commonly with that, which are branch derivatives, where they add what we typed in a small sentence, or forward or backwards, and you can't list all the combinations. So we would do the pluses and modified broad match to catch the rest of those without Google bringing in too much wild stuff that would make our ads way unproductive way quick, even if we were to eventually drill it down further later on. So this I'm going to explain then on this the first thing on this video as to why modified broad match was so important, and so therefore you're going to know what you're missing and what are the ways to compensate for it in terms of, and then how it will affect your results using the new way versus the old way on this video. So as a further explanation on this modified broad match, I have an example here. So this is actually how most people did it. This is not the way that I would have recommended doing it and did do it in the past. It takes more work, but the results were much better. So if you, let's say you had the keyword, you had best electrical contractor in Denver. Technically, if you had that and you had the plus symbols on it, it would also give you best Denver electrical contractor. So it would basically put the way most people thought of it as is they would put in a few words and then they would let Google find all the forwards and backwards and then just trigger everything along with it, as well as stuff where people added words in. The way that I would specifically use a modified broad match keyword was more so that, which is my example I'm going to get to down here, whereas if somebody added a word just at the beginning or part at the beginning, that our ad would be triggered for that, and more so than just having a catch-all to the forwards and backwards, because if there was a commonly written way to write it backwards, because in this particular example, electrical contractor in Denver, Denver electrical contractor. Well, if you're an electrical contractor, these terms, the ones that I specifically called out within the bigger terms overall, are going to get searched a lot. One person, because they don't want to work very hard, they want to spend a couple hours with their campaign and they're done, not recognize how much the details matter and stuff like this, they'll just put in the one keyword, modified broad match, which is, instead of that, they can use modified broad match still, but they can add, or should I say phrase match, because it's a local business, and do the forward and backward, specifically because in your ad, you can then specify in your ad, if I type in Denver electrical contractor, you can say Denver electrical contractor in your ad, versus if they type in electrical contractor in Denver, you can put in your ad electrical contractor in Denver, and that you're going to get a much higher click-through rate on your ad that way, which then translates into a much lower cost per click. You're also going to get a lot more of a profitable business out there that way. And so, with that, instead of using it to be able to put in 20 or 30 keywords and then cover the 2,000 whatever plus searches there are, we would put it in 500. And then whatever super long tail searches, in other words, we just simply like those sentences and stuff that people type in, then we do it for the catch-all and that kind of level. Hopefully that makes sense. So anyway, in general, moving on here, when would I use the modified broad match versus phrase match versus exact match before? So it depended on the niche that you're in. Broad versus tight niches. So if you're at a niche where it's difficult, you set up your ads, you're not really getting enough volume, that would be an exact situation where you could just try it out for yourself, then using the modified broad match can help. So I always start conservative. I'll start out with like phrase match. If I'm not getting the amount of clicks that I want and I want more sales and it's already super profitable, I'll take all my phrase match keywords and put them in modified broad match and see how that goes. If, on the other hand, I'm running phrase match campaigns, which usually the phrase match is where I start out with to measure if going more aggressive or conservative at it is going to be the proper way to go about it, so that I can get as many conversions that are profitable at the cost per conversion we need to be profitable and reach our margins, to get as many of those as we can without leaving any on the table. Start out with phrase match. Sometimes you do that and then you realize there's too much junk coming in. When you look at the search terms report, there's too many wild searches that are triggering your ad that will never be profitable, because you can't serve the customers that search for those things that way, and you're basically just wasting your money when those particular searches come in and you notice that. Then you could go down to exact match, and that can shore up the ROI of your campaigns really quickly, because then you're not going to let Google have the people that type in sentences, if you will, or just adding a word on the before or after your keyword, because it affects your results too much. And there's too many people who search for, let's say a lot of people are typing in cheap electrical services in that previous case, and you know you aren't the cheapest, and it was screwing up your ROI of your campaign. Well, then you could go back to just using an exact match, weed that cheap out. So it's just a matter of looking at the results. But in general, though, how I would structure things, and it's similar to how we're structured today, and I'll get to how the workaround here is what I particularly do to work around no more modified broad match, is, as I was touching on before, I actually set up one ad for every single keyword in the account. We'll go ahead and heavily mine all the different keywords we can find. And if you check my previous videos on keyword research, what I'll do is I'll go and I'll find all the keywords through Google's keyword tool. I will go on SpyFu, find all the keywords there of our competitors, find all and use all the permutations we can, where we put them in reverse, forward and backward, stuff like that. The forward and backward thing we'll do on our own, because there's a way to use a permutation tool to check all the and actually create a list of keywords that are forward and backwards and like that. And then we'll put a test campaign up on Google to see which ones are eligible to run. So instead of just letting Google having one keyword trigger forward and backward and all that stuff, we'll have all the keywords manually in the account, and then so that we can start out with a phrase match. But then we also do that because we want to be able to control what the user sees for every single keyword in the account. There's a big difference between someone seeing best Denver electrical contractor and Denver electrical contractor, because if they're searching for the best electrical contractor, we can say something totally different in that case, which will get a much higher click-through rate and more available market share from the profitable segment of market that's there on Google available to get. And so, and I know it sounds crazy, we'll usually have like even a local campaign, like for electrical contractor, a national company might be 2,000 keywords or more, sometimes 10,000 plus, and we have a data entry team that builds these campaigns out because nobody else is willing to do it, and therefore if you go beyond this, what the other people are willing to do, your ad instantly seems the most easiest to understand and interpret for the user, because it's just like what they typed in is exactly what you gave them and they wanted. Therefore, they're clicking on your ad 3 times more than any other ad. You just did the one thing that really is going to make your campaign extremely profitable and blow up. Well, let's say we just have a local campaign here again. We'll have one ad group for every keyword, which allows us to have one ad for every keyword. And we will, again, start out with phrase match, but what we'll find out too, as well, as a lot of times there'll be best electrical contractor Denver is a keyword that we found, and then electrical contractor Denver was a keyword that we found, and we have one ad group for each one of these keywords, as is all the different keywords in our account. But how do we actually specify to Google that we want our ad that's dedicated and specialized to attracting the person who wants the best electrical contractor to show, versus the ad for it when they type in electrical contractor Denver, the ad for best electrical contractor Denver will show up, and vice versa. It's actually there's a video that I made about keyword siloing. So basically what you do is once you got your keywords research done, you do what is called siloing. And in this particular case, we would have a ad group level negative keyword here. The negative keyword for this particular ad group, which holds and contains the keyword electrical contractor Denver, would have the negative keyword best in it, so that if they just type in electrical contractor Denver, we just have our ad that only can show up for this now. And then if they type in best electrical contractor Denver, it knows to, basically to only have the ad show up for this one, in other words. So you get the kind of process or idea there. And then, with that, we got most of the keywords that are eligible, that, get a significant searches a month covered. And even if they add like, how do I find best electrical contractor in Denver? At that point in time, the other stuff that they tack on there, the irrelevant terms, that, we still have a highly relevant ad for that person, versus a general ad for electrical contractor Denver all by itself. That's not going to stand out. But if they type in, the important word in there is the best, and the fact that our ad has best and our ad has a review in there, indicating that they're best, why we're the best. But, the headline one will just say the keyword verbatim. That's just as a side note as to this whole thing. It'll say like best electrical contractor Denver, and then the second headline there in that particular case can be customized then. Voted number one in, the local, trade publication in 2017, 18, 19. So you get the general idea versus another, if it just said, if the keyword was electrical contractor Denver, we would have the headline one, electrical contractor Denver, and that's it by itself, because people want to, it's easiest for people to click on what they typed in as long as it doesn't look computer generated. You never want to do that computer generated, but then at that point in time it could say on the headline too, since we know in that particular case they're not looking for best, focus on, because we know normally what people care most about through our testing is 24-hour service and 60-minute reply. They want speed. So then we focus on that in the headline. So you get my point. And yes, it takes a lot of work, but for your business, I can, instead of, if your campaign makes any money today, and you make, $500,000 a year from your Google account right now, if you do just what I said here in the process of keyword research and writing ads for everything, you'll make $2 million once this is all set up. And I'm not embellishing from your little local market wherever you're at, but that's a side note. I won't get into any further about this. I just thought you would like to know that a little bit more about how I do things. And then how does that actually then, what the point of all this was to move into what we're going to do about modified broad match not being there, and that we want to be able to get more. So what I do now, as a general saying that I have, is exact match is the new phrase match, and modified broad match is the new phrase match. So, because the exact match in the recent 2 or 3 months ago, Google came out with exact match isn't just having, if you put in red shoes, your ad can only show up for red shoes. It can show up for cheap red shoes and best red shoes and so on and so forth. Whereas before, phrase match, that was its role. So that's why I say exact match is the new phrase match. And then they got rid of modified broad match, but the modified broad match I found through already looking at our search term reports and campaigns that we run, tests that we ran, that modified broad match is really the new phrase match. So any place you would have used modified broad match before, you can now use phrase match. Because now what you're going to have with the phrase match is it's now forward and backward. So it'll cover this, like this type of situation where people use the words in a backward versus a forward form. But it will also add in there for you words before and after. So the phrase match operates just like a modified broad match. And in terms of just having before and after, with that, you can use exact match, because exact match operates like phrase match. And then there is no real exact match anymore. So in some space, I'd say about 5% of our accounts, the only thing that was profitable for was exact match. And that exact match, change with exact match, really killed us there. And so we had to work around it by going into, it was for certain consulting services. So we had to niche down as to like certain industries and target them with individual landing pages to have our edge, because the keywords were too wild and generating too many irrelevant searches, people looking for information and so forth, and that was just the way it was. Well, anyway, with that, if you do have a tight niche, you're going to have to do what I would recommend you do is still, and you don't have to start out with phrase, so you can start out with exact certainly, but normally what happens is if I have a fairly tight niche where there's not a lot of searches and they kind of need what, the most of what we can get, we'll do phrase plus exact. And, with that, if it's a broad niche, we'll do phrase only. So that's in general what we do. Normally, I would do phrase match starting out, and then I would only have an exact match keyword here if it looks like it's getting searched a lot and also converts at a high rate, so we can bid individually on that keyword on an exact match basis. Since exact match is now phrase match, you can't really do that so much anymore. And because we normally would, the phrase match is the new modified broad match. On national campaigns and so forth, we just use phrase match. And so with that said, I still usually use exact match and phrase match if it's together. Most cases, if it's a tighter niche, but if you have to, you just use exact match there. But anyway, that's kind of the ins and outs of modified broad match. How exact match has changed. Normally, what we're doing here. Start out if you aren't confident about and you have little money to have to make work to keep your campaigns going initially. Start out with your more conservative exact match, then go to phrase match. Never use broad match. And the differences between all this, how you should structure a campaign, actually how we structure a campaign here to get, we got to guarantee our clients' results. Our firm actually is the only firm doing that. Or we got to generate certain numbers for the client up front to be able to get payment from the client starting out as part of our service trial that we offer. So in that situation, we also do the same thing. We have to hit certain numbers in terms of cost per lead or cost per sale or ROI. We'll look at, I can usually eyeball it and tell if I can use phrase or exact right off the bat. And start more conservative if I'm iffy about it. Otherwise, go right for the phrase. Never going with the broad. And unfortunately, not having the option to choose phrase versus modified broad match. Just have to go for straight phrase match now. Even though, given that modified broad match is phrase match, and I use modified broad match more than phrase match anyway, it didn't hurt me as much as it could, but I still use phrase match a lot for like local contractors, which we can't do that anymore. Now we're got to use what is now like modified broad match for that, and it makes things a little bit more difficult, but that's the best way to work around it, or only way we can work around it, I should say, and just kind of deal with it. And if you figure everybody else has to deal with it the same way, then Google will eventually have to be forced to lower the cost per click on everything, because you're now paying for more junk clicks. And if they don't, I just see that's going to ultimately happen, because if they don't and nobody can make any money, then nobody's going to advertise. So there's a point to which Google can mess around with things like that and have everything work. So I see that they may not lower their costs, but they probably won't be nearly as able to keep raising their costs as they normally have been doing the last 15 years. So anyway, hope you enjoyed that video, and if you have any questions or comments about modified broad match or anything that I talked about here, leave a comment down below. I have a lot of other money-making strategies having to do with PPC here on this channel, so I really would appreciate if you just would subscribe, come out with them all the time. If you want step-by-step instructions on how to set up campaign structures like I talked about in this video, you can go to my site and blog, where I give step-by-step instructions how to set up campaigns, money-making campaigns that work and deliver guaranteed results for our clients. The way that I do it, they're on our site. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and hope to see you on the next one as well.